Welcome to Women on Wisdom. I'm your host, Sandra Boyd, and this is where real stories meet urgent truth. It's estimated that it will take nearly 124 years to close the gender gap. That's just way too long. We can no longer depend on governments, workplaces, or even women's groups to lead the change. It's up to us to have the tough conversations, challenge old stories, and reclaim our power. The time for waiting is over. The movement starts now, one woman at a time. Welcome to Women on Wisdom Podcast, Episode 5. I'm your host, Sandra Boyd. Imagine you're planning your next vacation. Maybe it's lounging on a beach, cycling through Tuscan vineyards, or touring European cities. Now, for a moment, imagine being dropped in the middle of a jungle by yourself without even a machete, or climbing a remote, imposing peak in South America or Africa. What about traveling with a nomadic tribe during their seasonal migration with no cell and no contact with the outside world? What if the wisdom that comes from these experiences sustain your values and your life philosophies and elevate your leadership skills, but most of all, empower you as a woman? That's exactly what my guest, Heather Arthur, does every single year. Heather is a transformational executive leader, speaker, podcast host of the Say Yes Movement podcast. She's also the vice president of Global Client Experience Centers at Scotiabank, and she leads over 3,000 employees. And Heather has been recognized as a top 30 CX leader and is the recipient of the Empowered Woman Award. Heather, welcome. I am thrilled to have you here. Let's dive in. And my first question to you is, to start off with, can you kind of give the audience an overview of some of your insights into your career journey, and just a little bit about your philosophy as a leader?
Absolutely, Sandra. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast. When you first asked me to share my adventures of a travel and wisdom as a leader, it had me reflect on, oh yeah, these amazing adventures that I have in my life. Every single one of them stacks a lesson. So I want to thank you for the work that you do for Women on Wisdom, but also for activating in me some storytelling moments, because we have to reflect on what we've done. So let me reflect on my career and sort of show you that it's not been a straight line, and in fact, it's been an evolution. So I'm going to go back quite a bit because I think our origin story is always a good one.
I agree.
Yes, absolutely. When I started school, I had no idea what I was going to be when I grew up. But I love science. I sort of love the, innovation of science. And so I went to school for biochemistry. And that was sort of the start of learning how to start something and finish something. And biochemistry showed me, follow a process, test for understanding. But that, of course, was not my career. And in fact, what happened is I came out of school and thought, well, I have to get a full-time job now, and started my career with an intent to pay some bills. And really what I stumbled upon is my love of taking processes into the corporate world and helping people activate themselves. And so a career in sales and service and process delivery evolved from that, never going back to my roots of biochemistry, but always in the back of my mind having that science and curiosity activated. And I tell that part of the story because I think it's important that we understand that sometimes we don't have to be on the same path, but we get to take all of the lessons with us along the path. Super, super important. So I've built my career in a really unique way, mostly in contact center world. So and contact center world in the world of service and sales, but for technology driven companies, so telcos, big banks, and really large client experience types of centers. And what I noticed in this whole process is I never felt that my job was to drive a contact center. It was actually to activate people to provide the best experiences possible. And along that path, Sandra, I did something really unique. I was in a place in my career where I was feeling kind of like what's my actual purpose? And my what I realized is that every day if I was working towards activating people, I felt like I was on purpose. But on the days that I was sort of getting into the weeds and feeling, all my emails aren't read, that wasn't helping me at all. And so what I did is I actually went to school for neurolinguistic programming, and that's just some fancy words for taking some processes and learning some techniques to help people get out of their own way and take action. And that one moment in time, that life lesson for me and working on myself has actually elevated myself to help millions of people now. And that's my goal. And along that path, Sandra, I did this. I call myself an accidental podcaster. I also have a podcast.
Yes, and I listen when I can on Friday mornings. So,
I love it. So it's called the Say Yes Movement podcast. And I say I'm an accidental podcaster because in my career, in my life, I put some goals out there for what I want it to be. And one of the goals was to impact 1 million people a year. Well, you can't do that sitting in your living room. You actually have to do something about it. And so podcasting became a mechanism to reach a larger audience. And so I am, a vice president for a large bank. I am a servant leader to those that I support. I love to mentor, and at the same time, I'm an accidental podcaster. So all of that, plus the adventure travel that I know we're going to get into, I'd say
yes.
is definitely a little bit about my career and a little bit of an insight of how I got to where I am today.
Well, I think that one of the lessons for anybody that's listening right now, especially if they're a young person, that you don't have to have all the answers at the beginning of your career. Just know that everything that you're learning along that journey will give you insight into what you like and really what you don't like, and how you can bring those lessons with you as you move forward. But I've always been really impressed by your legendary, and I do use the word because it is legendary, adventure trips that you take. For someone like me, I go on an adventure trip, and that means I go to a resort or a hotel or a country or on a cruise, and I take some of those side trips that are organized, or I go on a big hike. For you it's completely different. So can you share with us just, a few examples that illustrate your level of adventure that you seek in the places that you travel and the activities that you undertake, because there's no way in hell I'm going to be going on any of those adventures anytime soon.
I love it. Thank you, Sandra. So one of the, when I finished school, I actually got to travel Europe for 6 weeks with one of my girlfriends. And in that moment, I learned for myself just exposing myself to curious moments and moments where I have to get lost. And, at the time, we didn't have GPS, we didn't even have cell phones at the time that I was traveling. And so I came up with this philosophy that, oh, we're going to get lost, but getting lost doesn't mean the same thing as, emergency crisis. What it means to me is if we get lost, that means we're going to find our way, and we're going to activate some leadership qualities to find our way. And that, and we got lost a lot in Europe, especially in Venice. The streets are a little bit crazy and you don't know which way to turn. But what I learned in that process is there's someone out there that knows the way. And imagine that is a lesson that you take for the rest of your life, that there's someone else ahead of you in that path. So my lessons in leadership and travel started very, very early, and I activated a non-negotiable for myself. And that non-negotiable is every year you're going to travel. And if you keep doing that, your adventures get even more adventurous. And in the past 5 years, I have changed my adventure stories to be also a adventure of finding myself. And what that looks like is taking trips that have me disconnect from my current experiences of life and going to places that force that disconnect so far that I don't even have internet access. I have a satellite phone. That's all that I have. And so in the last 5 years, I've gone to places like Papua New Guinea, where we hiked through the jungle and stayed with tribes to learn, how their wisdom exists in the people around them. I've gone to Mongolia and rode on animals and literally, downloaded myself into what felt like a National Geographic magazine and, ushered 1,000 animals to their winter location. In Morocco, I hiked the Atlas Mountains, and that taught me tons of life lessons that in order to get to the top of that mountain, you just need to take one step at a time. And, slept in the Sahara Desert and just looked at the stars and realized that this world is so vast and so beautiful, and seeing yourself as part of that universe and not insignificant really helps you step up to your leadership. So those are just a couple examples of the adventures that I've taken, but there's some really cool activities that I'd love to tell you about that I've also done on those trips.
And I just want to let the audience know that you go on these trips and you sleep out in the open, and you're traveling with different tribes as they're taking their animals from the summer fields or wherever mountains to the winter, and you pay for this. So and
Yes.
on top of it, you're paying for these trips, but you don't know what kind of trip you're going to be going on until you're pretty much in the meeting place of where you're going. So maybe you could talk about this. You're not even planning these trips. You're just
No,
told what
no.
to wear, what to bring, and you show up. And so you don't even know what it is that you're going to be doing. So tell us a little bit about how that feels, the
You know what, Sandra?
surprise of that.
Yeah, I totally forgot that that's part of the leadership lesson. And you're absolutely right. I don't do this alone. I do it with a group, one, for safety, and two, so that I can actually have an experience that is a surprise and delight for myself. But this whole concept of leadership, and we think we control everything. And imagine as a leader, you let go of that control. And and as successful women and as successful leaders, we have a lot of control around what we do in our daily lives, what decisions we make. But when that isn't available to you, what do you have to dig deep into your belly of resources to do? So when you don't know what's going to happen next, what's the emotional reaction that you're having in your body? And what's the emotional reaction that's happening outside? And when you can put yourself in environments where that's tested, you really get to the core of who you are. And so I'm activating that at the most ground level possible by putting myself in these situations. And our success is always around the next decision that we're making. But if you
Yes.
are hiking up a mountain that you could fall off on the left-hand side or the right-hand side at any moment, if you don't take the next step with purpose, then it changes the way you see your life. And it changes the way you take that next step in life. So yes, I don't know what's going to happen on these adventures. I know which country to show up in. I know what to pack in my suitcase, sort of. And I know to have an open mind for what I'm going to meet, what I'm going to learn on the other side. And I'll tell you, Sandra, every single one of these trips, I meet a new version of me that is more courageous, more powerful, and more creative in resolution and resilient in emotional control, that just helps me with everything that I do. I'll give you a perfect example. So I'm a diver. I got my diving license. And just like I think every other human in this world, I'm scared of sharks. So I decided that my first dive after I got my certification would be a shark dive. Who does that? Like, even I think back to that version of me, I'm like, she's crazy. The first shark dive, I did it in Bahamas. And what happens is you jump in the water with the sharks. And sharks, here's some fun fact. They can't really see you. You're a shadow to them. So if you're wailing in the water, they think you're food. So the whole thing is to be calm, take some breaths, and swim with ease. Well, when you're in an emergency situation, you don't swim with ease. You don't act that way, but that's how you have to be to stay alive with the sharks. And then the second dive, what happens is they bring the sharks to you by enticing them with some food. So you're actually on the bottom of the ocean. You lock your legs around a big rock so that you're not moving, and then they feed the sharks. And the moment that this happened, that they started to feed the sharks are coming from the top of you, from the left of you, from the right of you, and they're all coming to eat the food. They don't care that you're there, but they want that food. And the first time a fin sort of went past my cheek, I froze, absolutely frozen. And all I could tell myself was this: just breathe. That's all that I
Yes.
could do. I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't move my body. And they actually told you, if you fall over, don't try to pick yourself up, because then you're moving and the shark thinks you're food. We'll come help you set yourself back up. So all you can do is breathe. That one life lesson, Sandra, has taken me through all kinds of difficult situations where I felt that fight or flight mode be activated. And I said to myself, just breathe.
I obviously have never been on adventures like you, but I do believe that that's really important, and it's something that runs in my head constantly. In specific ways does this life adventure empower you? Like, what specific ways does life empower you as a woman, and how does this empowerment translate into your leadership and your values and philosophy?
I have learned that adventure teaches me that fear and excitement live in the same place in my body. And I'll use an example that many people that are listening today can relate to. So, if you ask an audience who loves roller coasters and who does not love roller coasters, you'll get about a 50%, 50% will say, I love roller coasters, let me jump on that one. And 50% is absolutely no way is that for me. But when you ask the audience, where do you feel that feeling of fear? They'll say it's in their belly. And when you
Yeah.
ask the people that love it where they'll feel it, they'll say, I feel the excitement in my belly. And when you ask them to describe what it feels like, the fear people around that roller coaster will be like, oh, I feel hot, I feel sweaty, I feel these little butterflies in my stomach that are like really loud. And when you ask the excitement people for the roller coaster what it feels like, they're like, oh, I've got butterflies in my stomach, I can't wait to get on. And what the difference is between these two folks is the meaning that they've put on the activity that they're about to do. But it showed up in their body in the same place. And so I go on these adventures to remind myself that fear and excitement live in the same place. And all I have to do when I'm fearful of something is reframe it to say, what am I going to learn from this a moment? What am I going to prove to myself is possible? When I was in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains, it was going to be the hardest and longest climb that I'd ever been. And I didn't feel that I was in the best shape that I could get to that top. In fact, I didn't believe I could make it to the top. And they said, it's okay, Heather, we've got donkeys that can take you to the top. I said, hell no, am I getting on one of those donkeys? Because that looks even more dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I said to the gentleman that was my climbing guide, I said, how am I going to get to the top? And I was really seriously asking that question, but it was an internal question that I was wondering, am I going to be able to get there? And he looked at me and he gave me the best advice that I've ever gotten in my entire life. And I use this every single time I have a goal. And that advice was this: Heather, you're going to get to the top of the mountain like everyone else by taking one step at a time.
It's so true in life, right? If you don't take the step, you're not moving forward. You're not going on the journey. It could be even the step to resolving a problem in your life.
It is so, so true. And just, you don't need to go on these crazy adventures to learn these life lessons. And that's why I love this conversation, Sandra, because think about it. If you reframe a problem that you have and change it to excitement for the outcome that's going to happen. If you take that one step in life, if you just decide to take a breath, these life lessons are transferable for everyone. And you don't need to go on the crazy adventures or pay the crazy money to do it. You can just take those three life lessons into your next board meeting, into your next, conversation with your boss, into your next interview for your career, and do those three things. And boom, you are powerful beyond measure.
I have to say, the one thing when you're speaking and you're talking about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing, both in your body and your mind, I think about the years, I've been in business for over 30 years, and I have worked with my clients through the ups and downs of the economics and the 90s and SARS and 9/11, and I've worked with them, of course, through COVID and now everything that's going on in the world. You know, this has been a life adventure of ups and downs, and you don't know what the economy is going to look like. You don't know what the political situation is going to be, and every morning you wake up, and even the climate is, what's happening within in the environment is is taking us on that up and down roller coaster ride. So I just have to say to you, whether we know it or not, as I was listening to you speak, we don't know what's around the next corner. We just have to take one step at a time and breathe through the ups and downs. But I would like to ask you, all of these adventures that you go on and you're shutting down and you're turning, you're doing these things that they bring, probably you wouldn't do it if it didn't bring joy as well as fear and all the other emotions that you go through. What's been the most consistent messages or lessons that you've taken away from these adventures, and how do you bring those insights to your life and to your leadership roles?
Oof, there's so many, Sandra. When I reflect back on, I'll use, Papua New Guinea, and I spent 2 nights in the jungle with a tribe, with children that just, knew how to cultivate from the earth. And it was a moment that I activated, listen before you act. You need to rely on someone else to have the answers with you. And these little children knew how to climb a tree to get to a coconut. I can't climb a tree to get to a coconut, but we needed to drink some coconut water to sustain ourselves for the trek. So don't get caught up in who's going to teach you. The teacher is there for at whatever age or person. And your job is to be curious about the wisdom that you can gather from them. And then, just as we talked about the Moroccan Atlas Mountain trek, is sometimes you just have to keep walking, even when the path feels endless and you don't have the self-confidence that you can get there. I know that I can take one more step. And if I can do that in my business life, in my career, in my relationships, just take one more step, the mountain is going to arrive, and then the next goal will also show itself. And those are a couple of them, but a really fun one is when I was in Bhutan. Bhutan is a very unique country in that they measure, as part of their country measurement, a level of happiness for the people that live in Bhutan. And they put it right beside their gross margins. They put it right there, happiness margins. And when you can measure your own happiness, and then the happiness that's the ripple effect around you, I think that's truly being a leader of others and a leader of yourself. So that's just a couple of the life lessons that have come out of it. And also the awareness that we are part of this universe, and we're here for a very short time. But that short time can be as impactful for others as much as we want it to be. And that activation of curiosity, it makes excitement and adventure in everything I do. And I don't have to wait for a big a trip to go to that. Just that visualization, going for a nice hike near my house and stopping to hear the sounds of the forest or the sounds of my footsteps helps me be present in this moment. And presence is a gift that we often ignore or don't give ourselves. And then we miss the opportunity to be right where we need to be.
I I so love that. But when you come back, are you teaching your lessons learned? How do you weave it into your leadership philosophy and how you interact with people day to day?
You
Or is it
know,
just a natural process?
sometimes because my trips are so extravagant and so kind of, places in the world that not everyone's going to get to, I have to, I share my stories for sure, but I share them and then link them to something that they could do today. So if the leadership lessons is presence, and in the Amazon jungle, they actually took us into the jungle and we had been walking around with machetes all week to, cut our way through the forest. And for this exercise, they took our machetes away. And they took our machetes away after they showed us all the dangerous animals that could kill us in the Amazon jungle. And so anxiety and fear showed up, and they said, "We're going to put you in the jungle. We're not going to tell you when we're coming to get you, but you're going to be alone in the jungle for this period of time." And
The
so the
group of
first
you or individually?
individually, so we all had our own individual place in the forest.
Okay, Heather, you must need a therapist by the time you come back.
Well, let me tell you the story. So, of course, the first thing is absolute fear. And there's, little insects that can kill you. There's bullet ants that can sting you. There's, boars that can come out of the jungle. We had machetes for a reason. And now I'm in the jungle and I'm scared. I'm really honestly scared. And so that whole concept, just breathe, first came in, but I was also a little bit angry that I was by myself. Angry that, like, how could they leave me here? This is so dangerous. And that happens in real life, that we get angry at someone else. We think it's someone else's fault that we're feeling a certain way. And then there was this insect that was flying. It was a big one. It was a big one. It had big wings. And it was that sound of an insect flying
Ugh.
around your head, sort of the fluttering of the wings. And I couldn't quite see it because it kept circling around my head, but I could hear it. And the sound was like echoing in my ears, boom, boom, boom. And where we were where I was in the jungle, the canopy was quite thick, so sunlight wasn't getting through. So it was kind of dark as well. And there was this moment where this little tiny ray of sunlight broke through the canopy, and this bug became visible to me. And it was almost like I wasn't alone anymore. And I reframed this buzzing, annoying, like, is this thing going to sting me, to, wow, the sun just shone through and I can see that this irritation that I'm feeling is actually part of the fear process. And I was pushing externally how I was feeling onto the bugs, the fear, and actually internally I needed to just accept where I was standing. And the moment I did that was when the sunshine came through and showed me the things that I couldn't see just moments before. How often does that happen in our life, Sandra, that we think that someone's doing something
Ugh.
to us, and in fact, when we look at it from our internal feelings and stop blaming others, we can see it in a whole different frame of mind.
You know, I can't think of anything more true. Is in isolation alone, we, and I'll just use very simple, basic examples. We get an email and we're going, really? What the heck? What were they thinking? And you go through this whole journey of, I'm really pissed off. I'm mad. I'm going to tell them what for, or how could they do this for me? And then you talk to the person and, there's light that's being shone onto the issue or what they were trying to say, and it's something completely different than what you thought, and you have relief. But he went through all these crazy ups and downs, And that's the only thing I can think of right now. I mean, it happens in life, your personal life. It happens, when you're in your family, if you're married or partner, your kids, it happens all the time. So
I
it's a
love that
great
example,
example.
Sandra, because that is a perfect example of we have this emotional reaction to things, and we do it in isolation of all of the information that we could possibly gather to make the right assumptions. And often those feelings are rooted in our own beliefs around our abilities, ourself, and what's happening in the world. And I love the term imposter syndrome, and this happens to women all
Mm.
the time. Oftentimes society or our upbringing or our career examples have created this imposter syndrome that keeps going with us. So that email you might have gotten where your boss asked you for some details, you heard internally, you're not good enough. That's not what your boss said. They just wanted some details. And so that reframe is super, super important.
You have, I don't know, I think you told me that you may have sort of a visualization about imposter syndrome. And although it happens to both men and women, it's predominantly even the most successful women carry it with them throughout their careers. It's unbelievable to me. Some of the most successful women I know, when they share that that they have imposter syndrome. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that visualization.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear people say, how do I get rid of imposter syndrome? And I just want to reframe it for people and think it's just an invitation to think of it a different way. What if you never got rid of imposter syndrome because you invited that version of you to come along for the ride? And here's what that could look like. And the reason I say that is imposter syndrome, when you level up, you're going to feel unprepared, like this is a new adventure, like there's something new, and that imposter syndrome comes up. But that version of you is actually trying to keep you safe. And imagine that you have this loving version of you that's just trying to keep you safe. And so she's showing up and saying, are you sure about this? Are you sure you're educated enough? Are you sure you're the right person to do those things? And the visualization that I do is this: I want to be in the driver's seat. And if I'm driving a car, and we're going on a road trip, my imposter syndrome version of me can come for the road trip. But she's not allowed to take the steering wheel. But if she needs to, she can take the controls of the stereo. And she can play the music that makes her feel good. And if I don't like the music she's playing, I'm just going to turn down the volume. And so she's on the road trip with me. In fact, we're on it together. And whenever she feels like and wants to give me advice, like, no, 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 that's not the direction you should take, I just remind her, I've got the map in front of me. We're all good. We'll have a pit stop soon. And if you need to, just change the radio station. And this visualization that we're driving together, but I am in the driver's seat, allows me to invite her to the table, invite her for the road trip, and we're going on it no matter what, and we have a destination to get to. And so imposter syndrome is going to show up for me all the time because I'm always leveling up, but we're still going to drive it together. And I think that can be very powerful for people. Don't let her take the wheel. She will take us off that road.
Wow. That is so powerful. And it's powerful when I recently took a 6-week meditation course, which was 3 hours once a week, and it was lots of homework. And one of the things that they teach you, especially about anxiety and meditation, is to allow those feelings to be there and acknowledging those feelings, and that you can't get through anxiety until you acknowledge those feelings. And I feel like that's very, very similar. And I've never thought about imposter. I mean, I've been coaching for years, and what a great thing to say to somebody. Like, just let her in.
Yeah, we're going on
But
the
don't
ride
let her
together.
yeah, like, it's like anxiety. You can't get away from it in situations and in life. And we've all had it every now and then, or we have it a lot, depending. And you have to acknowledge it and explore it. Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for that. And I'm sure people listening are saying, hey, it's because at different times in your life, you may think you've got something for years. Like I remember feeling in certain roles, I stepped into it and I felt confident and I was feeling great. And then I hit this and I'm in my zone. I know where everything is. I know what everybody is about. And then you change roles or something happens and then all of a sudden, you're going through the, oh, am I the right person? Oh gosh, this is not working out. And what a great way to reframe it. Love it.
Sandra, you activated another thought for me, and I just want to share it.
Oh,
This
good.
whole meditation process and the anxiety that comes up, even in meditation, you think it's supposed to be this
Yes.
calm effect. No, anxiety
No.
shows up because it now has a way to come to the surface. And one of the things that I want to invite everybody to think about is having gratitude. You can't have gratitude and anxiety at the same moment. If you're really being present with gratitude, it is the antidote for that anxiety. And so thank your imposter syndrome version of yourself for being there to have a lookout for your safety, to make sure that you are taking the steps to ask for help when you need it, that you're taking the steps to say, wow, I need to learn more about this, but don't let it stop you either. So having gratitude for the versions of you that you're going to grow up to and meet in your future, and for the versions of you from your past that have set you up on this path of success, allow you to see all the versions of you that are so amazing that they are going to take you to new heights that you've never seen before.
I want to know that um, as a woman and a leader, what positive changes, and you work in the corporate world, you go off on these amazing adventures, but I, this podcast is about the 124-year gap there is for women um, to get to that spot of equality. And to me, that's the reason why I'm driven to and have the passion at this age and stage of my life to help the next generation and the next generation and the next generation of women. So I want to know what positive changes that you have witnessed in the corporate world recently, and then I'd like you to talk about what are some of the changes that the corporate world and leadership need to make in order to bridge that 124-year gap to help gender equality. Because I'm just going to add one more thing, because women are 50% of the population. And if we can't get 50% to equality, how do we get the rest of the groups to where they need to go for equality, to help this world in embracing diversity? So I just feel that we have to look at where we're at and where we're going and what needs to happen, honestly.
Sandra, you are so right. And, the first thing I want to highlight is this 124-year gap. It's not going to close by chance. It's going to
No.
close because we're having conversations like this. We're treating equality not as a side project or another activity that we're going to do, but as a core business strategy from a DEI lens and from an equality lens. And that is a powerful thing that corporations are still, I'll say, floundering with, or they're sort of flirting with, but they're not quite jumping all in with. And I've definitely over my career seen more women at the table. I've seen goals and numbers being put to DEI metrics, or how many executive level positions are held by women. And that's still what I call the numbers game. You're trying to visually say, this is what we're doing. But think about the process to get more women in leadership executive roles. What you have to look at is the root of the process for those individuals in their career. So for me, I went through a world that was, I was often the only woman at boardroom tables. And I remember sitting at those tables and watching the behaviors and the actions that were what we deemed success at the time. And success looked like someone that was very bold in their actions, very opinionated, very confident. And I tried on those attributes.
You and me both.
And it didn't work. It didn't work for me because I wasn't being authentically me, which is more curious and asking more questions and more human behavior driven and asking around how that makes you feel. And I tried on these different mechanisms, but I didn't have someone to look up to that showed me that that could also be a success pattern. So, when I look at myself and my career, I want to share those life lessons with as many women as possible, but also men, because men can see it from a different lens of how can I be the support person for people to feel whole and themselves. And I think, we need to move away from the numbers game in the corporate world that, we want to have 48% women in executive or 35, or in some companies they're still in the 20s. We have to get from that stage to
And if
shift.
you're a
Yeah.
woman of color, that drops down to, in the boardroom, like 4%, 5%. And how organizations can say, be proud of their numbers. They do have to change the number game, but let's stop being proud of something that's really so low after, so many years of trying to get equality. Like, they shouldn't be proud. I don't think right
No,
now.
and what I'm noticing is that they're going after this number, and then they're like, yay, we did it. And what they miss is the active sponsorship. So getting to a number is way different than actually having a sponsorship mentality and culture in your organization, where all the people that need that extra sponsorship have a way to have conversations, have a way to highlight their performance and their attributes, and have a way to have doors opened with them. And I say not for them, but with them, because it needs to be a partnership. Sponsorship is also us as women acting to ask for what the things are that we see we need for our future success, and being bold in asking for those things, but also, pushing the envelope on, can we do this a different way? What does success look like for me as an individual? And then go ask for it.
I I think that's important. However, and I agree with everything that you're saying. However, I think that corporations are really backpedaling as opposed to moving forward at the moment. And I would even, step out there. Some of the largest corporations like to talk about their women in leadership programs, yet they have cultures that are mainly male dominated, and they've got subcultures where bad
Yes.
behaviors are allowed to continue because performance is ruling the day. And that's what they value, the performance over what needs to happen in the world. And now we're seeing, of course, politically, we're starting to see that we're taking a step back. By the way, the 124-year gender equality gap actually rose during, it was 136 or something during COVID. And this is according to the economic forum that they do, that's based on 145 countries. And if the economy, it rose because women took on really strong roles to look after children, education and everything, and do the grocery shopping, do the cleaning, or they were marginalized because of the low income jobs that, in retail or hotel. So it pushed women back. And I mean, we've increased, but if the economy goes down again, we're going to be back to this number being increased again. So you're in the corporate world every day. You've worked mainly in male dominated environments, and sometimes being the only woman at the table. If you were to give advice to the board and HR, what's one or two actions that they can take right now to make changes in the corporate world?
I think the word that I use, sponsorship, is still left for interpretation.
Yes.
And so if you're asking a male to interpret what sponsorship looks like, they may use their own life experiences to define that. And it could be as simple as, well, I have women on my team. And we know, Sandra, that is not sponsorship at all. And
No.
yet that is a definition of success if that's the experiences they've had. So I think HR and corporations can evolve sponsorship to be part of the fabric of their culture by actually doing courses and training for all employees of what sponsorship can look like, and then putting it into action, and then celebrating those that take those actions. And we celebrate results, we celebrate, hitting sales targets, we celebrate hitting performance KPIs, but what about the KPI of sponsorship? How many people on your team have career transitioned through your team and gone on to another level? How many moments of time have you had that you have been in rooms to help elevate women or any marginalized communities? And that sponsorship celebration and a way to really activate that is the two steps that I would say. Training on sponsorship, so you're truly defining what you want that to look like in your culture, and then giving them the activities and the space to do those activities. And sponsorship is for men and women. It's for everyone.
That and writing down what those benchmarks are and making it part, indoctrinating into your corporate culture, your performance benchmarks, everything. So I love that idea. I think it's excellent, and more training needs to happen. Yeah. So thank you for that. I have one more question to ask you, and I'd love to know, what wisdom do you want to share with other women on their journey right now?
Ooh, I love that. The first thing I want to say is, make sure that you say yes to yourself first. I'm the host of the Say Yes Movement podcast. The idea is to say yes to the things that scare you so that you can step into your most beautiful future self. But the world is going to try to put you in a box, and that box is not the version that's going to help you grow. So say yes to yourself first, and that does mean that you're going to say no to the things that don't hold value for you, that aren't going to help you grow, or that have you staying small. And the other piece is, you don't need permission. But if you do, listening to this podcast, knowing that there are women that have paved the way ahead of you, that if you need a permission slip to really be the best version of you, let me give you that vote of confidence right now, and take the permission slip to be the best, bold version of yourself that you possibly can, because your voice is not too much, your ambition is not too bold, your dreams are not too big. You are ready to take that next step in whatever that goal is in your life. And that's the advice I'd give you. Take that permission slip and go run with it.
Wow. That's beautiful. I want to say thank you so much for today. And I would like to say to our audience, follow us wherever, and subscribe and like us, and wherever you find your podcasts, we're there. And I'd like to say thank you to Spencer, who is our in the background doing all the wonderful things that he does. So thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for all the work you do to help us elevate all of these conversations. It's absolutely amazing.
We are at a crucial juncture in history, and our equality is not a nice to have. It is now beyond negotiation. This is our future, our fight.
This episode of Women on Wisdom is sponsored by TalentWise Collective, a global talent development company that curates solutions for your organization's needs and culture. Please note that the opinions and comments of the guests or hosts may not align with TalentWise Collective. If you are interested in having Sandra speak at an event, or wish to reach out for any other inquiries, you can connect through our email at connecttwc@talentwisecollective.com. That is, connecttwc@talentwisecollective.com. Thank you.